Kunjabihasi Jaya Ram Kunjabihasi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaka Damayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Saprajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sarvetam Savadunam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitam Cha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavakeshwari Vrishabhami Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyam Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are doing Canto 3, Chapter 12, text 7 and 8, or 6 is there?
I think 6.
What's that?
6 is there.
6 and 7. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to read 6 by myself and then 7. So, but yatha sudhar evam. So, but yatha sudhar evam. Yatyata shashanai. Krodham yurvishaham jatam. Niyantu uprachakrame. So, yatha sudhar evam. Yatyata shashanai. Krodham yurvishaham jatam. Niyantu uprachakrame. So, the translation of this verse reads, on the refusal of the sons to obey the order of their father, there was much anger generated in the mind of Brahma, which he tried to control and not express. So I'll read that. On the refusal of the sons to obey the order of their father, there was much anger generated in the mind of Brahma, which he tried to control and not express. So here's Prabhupada's report. Brahma is the director in charge of the mode of passion of the material nature. Therefore, it was natural for him to become refusal of his sons to obey his order. Although the Kumars were right in such acts of refusal, Brahma, being absorbed in the mode of passion, could not check his passionate anger. He did not express it, however, because he knew that his sons were far enlightened in spiritual advancement. Thus, he could not express anger for them. Untitled Chapter 12, 6. And there's our first Diyani Hayamanopi. Now it's not. Oh, you in Canada, okay. Diyani Kriyamanopi. Kriyamanopi. Ruhormadhyat.
At Prajapatehe Sadhyo Jayata Tanmanyu Kumaro Nilalohitaha Dijani Grihamanopi Bruhormadhyat Prajapatehe Sadhyo Jayata Tanmanyu Kumaro Nilalohitaha Dhani Griyamanopi Bruhormadhyat Prajapate Sadhyo Jayata Tanmanyu Kumaro Nilalohitaha Diyam by intelligence. Nigrihyamanaha being controlled. Api in spite of. Bruvaho of the eyebrow. Mudhyat from between. Prajapatehe of Brahma. Sadhyaha at once. Ajayata generated. Tat his. Manyuhu anger. Humadaha a child. Nila lohitaha mixture of blue and red. So here is the translation. Although he tried to curb his anger, it came out from between his eyebrows. And a child of mixed blue and red was immediately generated. So I say, and you all please repeat, although he tried to curb his anger, it came out from between his eyebrows. And a child mixed blue and red was immediately generated. Yeah, it seems like there's a preposition missing there or something. So the purport here is, the face of anger is the same whether exhibited due to ignorance or knowledge. Although Brahma tried to curb his anger, he could not do so. Even though he is the supreme being. Such anger in its true color came from between the eyebrows of Brahma as Rudra in a mixed color of blue ignorance and red passion. Because anger is the product of passion and ignorance. Diya nigrishyamanopi bhruvor madhyat prajapate sadyo jayata tanmanyuhu umaro nilalohitaha. Although he tried to curb his anger, it came out from between his eyebrows, and a child mixed blue and red was immediately generated. So we're in a new chapter here. And this chapter is along the same lines as the previous chapter. We're still talking about creation, but we have gone now from discussing Sarga, which is the original creation, that which is done by the Supreme Lord, to Visarga, which is subsequent creation, where we're talking about what Lord Brahma does once all the basic pieces are in place. So Brahma is largely in charge of generating the population necessary. We know that the material world is made up of dead matter, which we call the Bahiranga Shakti, the external energy. And of course, in this external energy, there is the living entities, which are Tatastha Shakti. They are in between the spiritual energy and the great material energy. So they can lend their consciousness either to the spiritual energy and become spiritualized, or they can lend their consciousness to the material energy and become contaminated and gradually more and more entangled in the ever mysterious and painful process of birth and death. So if you ever have any kind of difficulty in performing your service, you feel frustrated, well, happened even to Brahma. So what to speak of us? You know, Brahma also didn't have an easy go of it. He was supposed to create the universe, and it isn't going easy for him either. So he's created the four Kumaras. We've heard about that. We've heard about the creation of the four Kumaras. And after creating the four Kumaras, he asked them to generate progeny, and they flatly refused because they were advanced in spiritual knowledge, and they did not want to be contaminated and entangled in having offspring. So Brahma could understand that this was actually a higher attitude, but at the same time, he had labored and focused and wanted to create progeny, and here the door was being slammed in his face, and was being slammed in his face by his sons. So what's interesting is this is the very beginning of the universe, and there's already the concept of a son and father relationship. When you think about this, this is interesting because in modern philosophy, philosophers have batted around the idea of how do things relate to their names? How are human beings classifying things? There seem to be some things that just seem to be there. You know, where did the idea of father and son or parent and child come from? Well, obviously, we see that beings are generated through sex life. But there appear to be a lot of things more than just the person whose semen I came from. You know, father is more than just the person whose semen I came from. And in every culture across the world, there's the notion of fatherhood, and fatherhood has very certain things associated with it, and it's cross-cultural. Why exactly is that? So we see that there are archetypes or original concepts that existed even before the creation, and even at the very beginning, where there are no families yet. There are only 5 beings in the world, Brahma and his 4 sons. Already there's a father and son relationship. No mothers yet, because no mother involved in that particular generation. And another thing that's interesting is the idea that already they're talking about the fact that the sons refuse their father is an issue. You know, in general, sons are supposed to do what the father desires, even if they're already matured, you know. Certainly they're supposed to do that if they're children, but when they mature, they're supposed to do what their father wants to do as well. But what's interesting here is that we're seeing an archetype, or we're seeing a relationship at the very beginning of the universe. We're not talking about amoebas, you know, bubbling around and dividing by their cells, you know. We're talking about the very beginning of life was not amoebas boiling around in some black smoker on the bottom of the ocean or something like that, the way modern concept is of how life started. We're talking about Brahma and 4 children. And although his 4 children did not follow his authority, he could understand that they were working on a higher authority. And although he tried to curb his anger, he couldn't do that. So what I think is hard for a lot of people to understand is that there are already existing natural categories in the world. They happened before human beings got labels and figured out sociology and all this kind of stuff. All these things are already pre-existing. Even at the time of Lord Brahma, all these things already existed. And yet, although there are rules, there are exceptions. So some people can appreciate the rule, but not exceptions. And some people think that there are no rules, everything's an exception. And that's where our world is today. You have people who think that everything should be the way it was 5,000 years ago, or maybe 1,000 years ago, whatever it is. There should be no exceptions to those rules. And that, you know, the way that human society works should be exactly the way it's always been. And then you have on the other side, people who think there should be no rules at all, that everybody should just do whatever they want to do. However, it makes out that human society, human roles are all plastic and we can do with them whatever we want. Now, neither view works. We have to realize the rule and we have to realize the exception. Both things have to be accepted. And so Brahma knew the rule, the Kumaras knew the rule. The Kumaras were an exception to the rule, and Brahma accepted the exception, but he could not detach himself emotionally, which is what happens to a lot of us. You know, when we're doing something and we're really focused on it, when we slip and something clumsy happens, we get angry. It's natural. It's easy for it to happen. And oftentimes when there are people involved, we have to be careful because that anger can come against the people that we're working with, even if they're not to blame. And in this case, the Kumaras were not to blame. They hadn't done anything wrong. But Lord Brahma was able to check his anger from expressing against the Kumaras, but it came out anyway. So it came out between his eyebrows as a child of mixed red and blue, which of course we know will be Rudra or Shiva. And this child of mixed red and blue in the next few verses, we'll find out he cries loudly. Ruroha, he cries very loudly. And that's how he gets his name, Rudra, because to cry is the same verbal root to cry, Rudro and Rudra. So because he cried out very loudly. Now, why is he crying? Babies cry when they're born, but Lord Shiva is not an ordinary baby. He's already very conscious. But he's asking Brahma for his name and his location. We're going to find that out in a few verses. He's asking Brahma for a name and a location. Now, that seems kind of puzzling to us. Why would a child be preoccupied with his name and location? But in one sense, that's what we're all preoccupied with. We want to know who we are and what we have to do, so how do we relate to our environment? And then Brahma will reply to Rudra that do not cry. I will certainly give you a name, and I will certainly give you a location where you can reside. So Brahma will assure Shiva that these things will be there. And of course, eventually we learn that Brahma gives Shiva 11 names. There are 11 Rudras. And they are the same yet different. We hear about them in the 5th canto and other places, these 11 Rudras. And then we hear that in the daughters of Daksha, that there are millions of Rudras. And they are afraid of one another. So Rudra prays to not be destroyed by the other Rudras. And we find in the purport, Prabhupada tells us that the devotee then has no fear of Rudra because he is protected by the Supreme. Because who is Rudra praying for protection from the other Rudras? He's praying to the Supreme Lord. So we are protected from this energy, the Rudra energy, which we'll find out has to do with expressing anger. So anger is a combination, we learn, of passion and ignorance. Passion is associated with the color red, and we see that cross-culturally. In all cultures, red is associated with passion. Chinese really like the color red because it means auspicious to them as well. And so temples are usually painted red. And of course, red china is red. And whenever somebody gives you a donation who's Chinese, they put it in a red envelope because it's auspicious, because it's red. So it's a very passionate culture. Then blue, I generally don't associate blue with ignorance, but here Prabhupada is telling us that blue is associated with ignorance. And we see that sometimes the idiom is someone is in a blue funk. Somebody is very disturbed mentally and depressed. So that's called a blue funk. So, I guess that's kind of the same concept here. Kind of depressed, not very focused, a disconnected, a dysfunctional mood, being in a blue funk. So Lord Shiva is blue and red, and he will be in charge of many different things. And he is one of the important personalities in the universe because he is part of the system of destruction when the universe needs to be destroyed or some aspect of it. Shiva is a part of that destruction. Now, this chapter, chapter 12, is from verse 1 through verse 27. We find about the creation of the four Kumars, Shiva, and the 10 sages. That's what we hear about. So we're talking about Visarga here. This is a generation of entities. And these particular entities are not just any entities. These entities are the founding generators or Prajapatis of the entire universe. These 10. And the Kumaras, and of course, Brahma and Shiva as well. So from verse 28 through 48, we're going to hear about Brahma generating Vak, or speech, his daughter. And then we learn about Brahma being inordinately attracted to his daughter, and how the sages mention that this is inappropriate, and Brahma gives up his body as a result of this mood of attraction toward his daughter. And then we learn about the Vedas being generated, and we learn about Varnashram Dharma being generated. That's in verses 28 through verses 48. Then from 49 to 57, the last part, we hear about Brahma generating Swayambhuva Manu and his wife Shatarup. So this is another important aspect of how the universe gets populated. We get the first Manu and his wife, and then their progeny will come from there. So, what's interesting too, we've been sometimes hovering around this idea of why do we have to know all this stuff? But it's interesting that the Bhagavatam spends a lot of time on this idea of creation, and not only once, but in this very canto, in Canto 3, in chapter 20, we're going to go over almost the same territory again. It's surprising how similar chapter 13 chapter 12 in the third canto is to chapter 20 in the third canto. A lot of the same things are there. We learn about more generations of Brahma from his mind. So far, the four Kumaras, Shiva, and then we're going to learn about these 10 sages. They are, if I remember right, Atri, Angira, Brigu, Daksha, Kratu, Marichi, Pulasta, Pulaha, and Vashishta. And of course, the 10th one will be Narada Muni. So those are the 10 sages. And these are mind-born sages. And I kind of did a little bit of research because I always was wondering, how does this relate to the 7 sages or the Shaptarishis too? But the Shaptarishis are a different thing. Shaptarishis are sages that are associated with the Big Dipper constellation in the sky. And I think even they change with each Manu. Different sages become these 7 Shaptarishi sages. But the 10 great sages are the ones I think that are the first ones that start off the entire process of generation. And we know that with Swayambhuva Manu, he is the father of 3 girls, which are, Prasuti, Akuti, and Devahuti, and 2 boys, which is Priyavrata and Uttanupad. So these will figure in a little while, but particularly we find that Devahuti will be wed to Kardam Muni, and Akuti will be wed to Ruchi, and Prasuti will be wed to Daksha. And from Prasuti, Daksha will have the, 60,000 Haryashvas, and then the 10,000 Shabalashvas. And when Narada Muni preaches to them, then he has 60 daughters. And these 60 daughters are really where all universal generation comes from. They are given to various different sages. So don't worry if you can't remember all these different things. This is a huge family, and this is the never-ending family. This family has been going on for already millions and millions of years, and will be going on after we're, way long gone, hopefully. So this family is part of our larger family of how creation comes to be, how the universe is governed, how the powering manipulators and organizers of the universe, how they come on the scene. And through particularly the daughters of Daksha, we will see various kinds of non-human species generated. The demons, the demigods will have also the plants, the animals, the birds, the insects, all that. They are generated by these various daughters of Daksha and Kasyap Muni. So 13 of the 60 daughters of Kasyap Muni, of Daksha, are given to Kasyap Muni, and then later 4 more. So that makes 17 all total. And from many of these and the other, daughters of Daksha, we have all these, the Vidyadharas, the Kinnaras, the Kimpurushas, the various different other classes of living beings, those that are above human but not fully demigod, those who are above human but are antagonistic to the supreme, the various demoniac species. We have the Nagas, or the serpents, or dragons, or whatever you want to call them, the various subterranean species like that. So we have all this variety, and each of these have a different karma, because that's why you get put in a particular role. Your karma makes you eligible for a particular kind of body. And that's how the material energy works. Because of your karma, you're born in a certain family. And because of your karma, you have a certain kind of body. And that body has some things that are good about it and some things that are not so good about it. And Kali Yuga is that time when all those who really didn't want to have much at all to do with the Supreme Lord, that's when all those people can come out and do their thing. So that's what Kali Yuga is all about, in case you haven't noticed. We hear about these things because it helps us to orient ourselves, just like we were saying with Rudra crying. So he's crying to know what his name is and what his location is, or what's his situation. And that's the way we all come out of the womb. Because of the nature of material existence, our memory of our past life is wiped from our consciousness, and we come out of the womb as if we've never existed before. But of course we have. And depending on what kind of existence we've had, is what kind of womb we come out of. And then eventually we get our orientation. And that's how material life works. So by the parents, we are given certain cultural understandings. We're given certain kinds of schooling. And then usually about the time of puberty, that's when the super soul reminds us of what we had wanted in our previous lives. And so we pick up that thread that has tied together many of our past lives. And that's why usually about that time, a time of puberty, that's when children suddenly, yeah, I want to join the army, or, you know, I found what I really love. It's death metal rock, you know, or I'm going to, you know, travel to Europe as soon as I can, you know, get a passport or whatever it is, you know. These kind of things come on to children about that age because it's where we've gone from that stage where we were kind of unaware to that stage where now we kind of know how society works, but now we're connecting finally through to our previous lives and we're starting to follow the same tread, the same old that we followed in a previous life. And so we learn these things in Srimad Bhagavatam to kind of pull us away from making the same mistakes that we've made life after life, following the same ridiculous trends that we followed life after life. And so just like we hear about it here, Lord Chaitanya gave a similar kind of explanation to Ramananda Roy, you know, or he elicited it from Ramananda Roy. Tomorrow's the disappearance of Ramananda Roy. So when Lord Chaitanya met Ramananda Roy, he was very elated, but he kept himself kind of hidden. He didn't really make any overt motion toward Ramananda Roy because Ramananda Roy was surrounded by various officials because Ramananda Roy was a political personality. He had a post. And so they agreed to meet later in a secluded place. And then when they met, then Lord Chaitanya embraced Ramananda Roy, great ecstasy. And he began to ask Ramananda Roy questions. Of course, Lord Chaitanya knew the answer to these questions. And Ramananda Roy knew that Lord Chaitanya knew the answers to these questions. But he also knew that Lord Chaitanya was using him as a sounding board to bring these things into view. So what's interesting is Lord Chaitanya asked Ramananda Roy, please tell me something about how one can please the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So of course, Ramananda Roy talks about how by following one's position in the Varnashram system, one can please the Supreme Lord nicely. And Lord Chaitanya rejects that. And then Lord Chaitanya, then Ramananda Roy talks about how by one being renounced, one can please the Supreme Lord, and Lord Chaitanya rejects that. And then Ramananda Roy talks about how one can renounce, yet at the same time, you know, engage in some kind of service. And so little by little, Ramananda Roy kind of gives us a hierarchy of what is actually pleasing to the Supreme Lord. So even among people who claim to be religious, people who are not demoniac in their outlook, what is it that really is the essence of religion? What's the center of the bullseye? Not what's on the outside, but what's the center of the bullseye? Krishna does a similar thing in chapter 12 of Bhagavad Gita, where he says, he's telling Arjuna that always think of me. And he says, of course, if you can't do that, then engage in the process of devotional service. In this way, you will develop a desire to attain to me. And then he goes further out from that. But in this way, Lord Chaitanya is going the other way around. He's starting from what's farther out by asking Ramananda Roy to speak about it. And in this way, we're gradually honing in to what it is that pleases the Supreme Lord. And we find out that is engaging in a relationship, in conjugal relationship with the Supreme Lord, in intimacy, is what actually pleases the Supreme Lord. The gopis are the essence of that which pleases the Supreme Lord the most. So they are the essence of it. And, at a certain point, Lord Chaitanya puts his hand over Ramananda Roy's mouth and says, "Don't say anything more," because he was getting into very intense territory, talking about ecstatic separation from the Supreme Lord. So at that point, Lord Chaitanya sort of caps the discussion. But in all these ways, we're getting oriented, just like Lord Shiva will be oriented in a few verses. We're being oriented to what our name is, who we are, and what we need to do. So I will stop. And are there any questions, comments, or?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for your nice explanation. Maharaj, would you like to say something more about, you mentioned this blue and ignorance, they're related to each other. People get disturbed by coming in contact with blue, something you were mentioning, I didn't get that. Could you explain a little more about this ignorance and blue?
Yeah. It's interesting. As you said it, a lot of things popped in my head I didn't even think about, that we say someone has the blues, of course, that's a style of music as well. But blue, if someone feeling blue, what does that mean? In English, common idiom, being blue means that a person is sad or, kind of not feeling well. And when we talk about sickness or dysfunction, this is certainly an obvious manifestation of the mode of ignorance. Goodness is like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, it's illumination, it is balance, it is being able to put things in proper perspective. It is it's the ability to control the senses and to be equal-minded. Whereas passion, goodness is up here, like a straight line, high line. Passion is like a sine wave, like a wave. It's up and down because we're interested in material results or goals being manifested or captured. Then passion is usually considered to be like red. I think sometimes goodness is considered to be like yellow. Prabhupada said different colors at different times. I've seen it slightly different in a few different places, but red is definitely passionate. It's hot, it's a color of heat. And in passion, one goes up and down, up and down. One day one is very elated because material desires are being met the way one expects. Next day one is depressed because material desires have not been met. Now, when somebody goes up and down, eventually one gets broken. And then one goes into the mode of ignorance. So the mode of ignorance is the state where a person is dysfunctional, where one is got legal problems, mental problems, health problems, social problems. Person in the mode of ignorance is cut off. They are inert. They are overcome by sleep and overcome by illusion. So these are all things associated with the mode of ignorance. Again, in the 18th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we have some more explanations of things in the mode of ignorance, passion, and goodness. And we see that there is a three-color version of everything. So there are three modes of nature, and there are three primary colors. And Prabhupada oftentimes associates those two things together. The three primary colors can make all the colors of the rainbow if you mix them in the correct way. In electronics, those three colors are green, red, and blue. But in painting or in other situations, they can be green, red, and yellow, or some other. And in printing, it's usually cyan, magenta, and I forget what the other one is. But in different ways, there are three different colors, and they can be mixed together to create any color of the rainbow. And in a similar way, the three modes of nature are constantly interacting, sometimes pushing one to the bottom, pushing one to the top.
Mostly I wanted to know about what people say when comes to blue. And you say some English expression is there. People say associated with blue means a sign of sickness, something like that. That's why they don't prefer this blue color. Something?
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, sickness. Of course, Krishna is blue, but that's a different
No,
blue.
that's a different thing. Yeah.
He's
No,
kind
no.
of a
No, I'm talking about the common understanding of the common people about
right.
blue.
Yeah, yeah. Usually, even in American English, and I think in other versions of English, usually blue is associated with sadness. It's associated with sickness. It's associated with depression. Um, Oftentimes those color names are associated with those types of emotions and expressions. I've seen it a number of times.
Americans don't like blue, right?
What's that?
Americans don't like blue color.
Yeah, well, blue jeans are very popular, but that's a quirk of how they came into existence. But I think people like different colors. But the other thing that's really associated is the blues, which is a style of music. Actually, it's a very canonical style of music. It's 12-bar blues, or sometimes it's the blues is probably one of the most rigid musical forms on earth. It starts off with a 1, it moves to a 4, then it goes back to the 1, then it goes to the 5, and then sometimes goes 5, 4, back to 1. So it's a very rigid style. And of course, it has a flat 7. So all these things are associated with the blues. And the blues is about, as the joke goes in music, that what happens when you play blues music backwards, you get out of jail, your wife or girlfriend comes back, and your dog comes back to life. That's what happens when you play blues music backwards, because it's usually about those themes, of a romantic relationship going horribly sour, of someone being in jail, of somebody having some horrible thing happen to them. And so this is, one of those things, like I say, when a person actually realizes what the material world is all about, they either commit suicide, they become a devotee, or they play blues guitar. Those are the three options that you can do when you actually realize how the material world really works. So those things are a part of the nature of the way things have sifted themselves out as material nature has gradually evolved further and further and further. Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you, Maharaj, for a wonderful lecture. In the class, you were telling any desire you have, if it is left unfulfilled, you have to come back to see the fruition of it, to finish it.
Right.
Supposing, preaching, Pavandracharya asked everyone to preach, so we are also preaching, we have desires. So in preaching, for some reason, some of the desires are not fulfilled. So will it become the reason to come back again for us?
I'm not exactly hearing it. It's kind of a slap back. I'm hearing two sounds at the same time. If you just come real close, but you can still speak in the mic for the benefit of people in video
Yeah.
land.
You said unfulfilled desires are the cause of coming back.
Right. Right.
So my question is, Prabhupada asked everyone to preach. So we are all preaching by the order of the previous Acharya, especially Prabhupada. So supposing you are left with some unfulfilled desires in the area of preaching, will it cause you to come back?
Well, maybe, unless Krishna purifies you at the last moments, that could happen. But in general, what we understand is that if we really attempt to prosecute Krishna consciousness, whatever we don't whatever we don't manage to overcome at the end of life, we will come back in a place where Krishna is performing his Boma Leela on the earth plane. And we will this time be involved in direct, contact with the Supreme Lord or Lord Chaitanya in a Leela, and that will mean that whatever we haven't done at that point will be cleansed up. We will be focused to move on. It is possible to go directly back from this life, but probably not so likely for all of us. But it is possible. And at the time of death, sometimes there are, great issues, great pain or great fear or great discomfort. And that can also cleanse us of various material desires. Or alternatively, Krishna can fulfill those material desires in a way that allows us to continue being like devoted to him, as with Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj he was ashamed actually when he finally got to see the Supreme Lord, and he said, "I was searching for broken glass. You've given me something better, But nonetheless, Krishna gave him that. And similarly with Bali Maharaj, he was giving everything Krishna, but he Vamanadeva needed one more place to put his foot, and Bali Maharaj surrendered everything. But he said, next Manvantar, you will be Indra. So Bali Maharaj is waiting in Talaloka for the next Manu to come around, and when the next Manu comes around, he'll be the Indra. So he will get what he was actually trying to do with the demons. They were trying to get the heavenly planets, but he won't have to work at getting that. He'll be the guy who's there already. So all those kind of things. So sometimes the Supreme Lord fulfills a particular material desire and lets the devotee move on past it, or in some cases it's purified through pain or difficulty, and in some cases there's another lifetime where a person will be in the intimate association with the Supreme, and therefore purified that way. It's actually interesting that we can have desires that we don't desire. That's kind of paradoxical. I see that all the time. You know, I have desires that I don't desire. We're kind of at war with with ourselves, you know, at a very deep level. You know. But if we continue with devotional service, Krishna consciousness is like the, you know, real new blue cheer, you know, the washing soap that gets all the dirt out, you know. In America, there was this kind of soap called New Blue Cheer, you know, and it was supposed to be better than all the other soaps. And you would put it in your laundry detergent, it would get your laundry very, very clean. You know? So this is what the process of devotional service is like. Ultimate laundry soap. Okay, so Hare Krishna, all glories to all of you, all glories to Krishna. Hari Hari Bo.